Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Every decision, every step you take is influenced by the expectations of others, leaving you wondering, so who am I living for? It's time to face the truth that the trap of pleasing others can make you lose yourself, and now is the time to break free from it. We live in a world where it's all too easy to become entangled in the expectations and desires of others. From the moment we wake up, there's an endless pressure to meet someone else's needs, whether the boss at work, a partner at home, or the constant barrage of social media influencers telling us how we should look, act, or feel. But here's the hard truth we often overlook. Are we truly living for ourselves, or are we merely existing to fulfill the needs and desires of everyone else? The cycle of people-pleasing often starts innocently. We tell ourselves as a way to show love, to be liked, or simply to avoid conflict. But over time, this pattern chips away at our sense of self. We lose sight of who we truly are, what we genuinely want, and what makes us feel fulfilled. Instead, we begin to make choices based on what will please others, not what will nourish our own happiness or growth. This is a trap of people-pleasing. Subtle, hard to detect, but easy to fall into. It's like wearing a mask, pretending to be someone you're not, just to keep everyone around you satisfied. But the cost is steep. The emotional toll, the inner turmoil and the frustration of feeling disconnected from who you truly are, it all builds up, leaving you asking, who am I really living for? In this video, we'll explore the emotional trap of people-pleasing, and more importantly, how to break free from it. Because, in the end, the only life you should be living is your own. People-pleasing can start from a good intention, but when it becomes a habit, it can lead to serious consequences. In modern society, where self-expression is highly valued, it's easy to fall into the trap of constantly trying to please those around you, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, or a romantic partner. At first glance, this may seem like an act of being a good person, but in reality, it reflects a lack of self-awareness and a disconnection from who you truly are. 1. The psychological nature of people-pleasing. When someone spends too much time and energy trying to please others, they are actually hiding their own feelings of insecurity and lack of self-confidence. Behind each sacrificial action is often a deep-seated fear. Fear of rejection, fear of criticism, or fear that they won't be loved if they don't do everything perfectly. These feelings, though not always fully acknowledged, strongly influence their behavior and decisions. A people-pleaser often finds it difficult to set boundaries. They fear that by saying no to others, they'll be seen as selfish or not good enough. But in doing so, they lose themselves. Unable to refuse, unable to follow their own desires, they gradually become puppets in their own lives, living according to others' expectations while forgetting what they truly need and want. 2. The consequences of living for others. One of the most severe consequences of always trying to please others is emotional exhaustion. When someone spends too much time and energy fulfilling the needs of others, they begin to feel drained, unable to care for themselves. They'll start feeling empty because they are no longer living for themselves. Instead of having meaningful experiences and moments, they are simply living to meet others' expectations. This leads to a vicious cycle of fatigue and low self-worth. When you cannot say no and live for others, you'll begin to feel worthless. You no longer know who you are or what truly matters to you. At that point, insecurity grows, and you find yourself trapped in a constant feeling of anxiety. 3. Losing connection with yourself. The biggest trap that people-pleasers fall into is losing their personal identity. When you live for others, you gradually lose the freedom to express your own emotions and needs. They are always willing to do what others ask, but they never dare to ask for what they need. These individuals may feel lonely in their relationships because they can't truly connect with others from their true selves. Constantly pleasing others is not an act of love or care. It is an act of fear. They fear not being loved if they don't please others. But in doing so, they miss the opportunity to build truly deep relationships based on mutual understanding and respect. That's why, often, these individuals feel isolated in their own relationships. For the feeling of never enough. One prominent feature of people pleasers is the feeling of never being enough. They always feel that no matter how hard they try, they still don't receive the recognition or love they long for. This is a painful feeling, as it makes them constantly tired and feel worthless. The truth is, they cannot receive what they desire because they don't allow themselves the right to ask for attention or love. This never enough feeling also leads to dissatisfaction with life. When they don't feel properly loved, they begin to wonder if they're lovable at all. They start doubting their self-worth and feel that they don't deserve the good things in life. 5. The path to breaking free from the trap. To break free from the people-pleasing trap, one must learn to say no and identify what truly matters to them. They need to learn how to say no without guilt and dare to demand respect for themselves. Learning to care for oneself, set healthy boundaries, and love oneself are essential steps in escaping the cycle. 6. The importance of living for yourself. When someone learns to live for themselves, they not only protect their mental health, but also build healthy and meaningful relationships. Living for yourself doesn't mean being selfish or not caring about others. It means knowing how to love yourself and understanding that self-respect is a foundation for building sustainable relationships. When you live authentically, not only will you be loved fully, but you will also be able to love others freely and sincerely. At some point, those trapped in this cycle realize they no longer know who they are. They look into the mirror, and instead of seeing a person free with their own dreams and desires, they see only a faint reflection devoid of identity. Feelings of anxiety, unease, and sometimes depression begin to surface as a response in the body and mind to the growing disconnection between who they truly are and who they are trying to become to please others. This feeling becomes even more unbearable when they realize that those around them, despite loving or respecting them, cannot understand the suffering they are enduring. When they constantly do everything to please others, their awareness of their own personal needs and desires slowly fade away. Each day becomes a series of actions, words, and gestures not for themselves, but for an ideal model imposed by society and others. This leads to a relationship that is not only dull, but also full of deception, as they must always wear a mask to avoid being discovered. This loneliness is a loneliness within their own relationships. They live alongside others, but there's an invisible gap that feels almost impossible to bridge. The inner struggle grows stronger, because at this point, they realize that breaking free from this trap means not just starting over, but confronting an undeniable truth. Change is never easy. The cost of living authentically is high. They will face criticism, loss, and perhaps even the end of some relationships. But it is this painful acceptance that marks the first step toward reclaiming themselves. This awakening is not a complete liberation, but rather the beginning of a long, challenging journey. However, only when they gather the courage to move forward will they find the path back to themselves. The more clearly they see the trap they've fallen into, the more exhausted and drained they feel. Every day, they wake up and try to maintain a perfect image for those around them. But behind that facade is an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The stress, the constant anxiety. It doesn't stem from difficult situations at work or at home, but from the inner turmoil they're facing. Because of this, they start to realize that despite being surrounded by people, they feel lonelier than ever. Their loneliness isn't from a lack of loved ones, but because no one truly understands them, no one sees what they really need. And this leads to a deeper question. Do I deserve to be loved if I'm not pleasing everyone? This question isn't a simple one. It strikes at the core of the emotions of those who live for others. Having become accustomed to sacrifice, to living for others, they cannot fathom a life where they are loved and accepted unconditionally. This fear, though invisible, wields immense power, preventing them from stepping out of their own shadow. That's why, when they realize they've spent so many years trying to please others, they understand that it's time for change. But the question remains, how? How can they reject the expectations of others without feeling guilty? How can they love themselves without fearing that they'll be seen as selfish? These are the questions they face every day. The process of change is not just a decision. It's a revolution in the mind, a battle to reclaim freedom and wholeness in life. No matter how difficult the road ahead may be, they know that only by starting to live for themselves can they break free from this cycle and find peace within. The trap of living for others is a psychological snare that is not easy to recognize, but profoundly impacts our lives. When we spend too much time and energy trying to please others, we gradually lose ourselves. Not living authentically leads to not only physical exhaustion, but also spiritual depletion. The mind becomes overwhelmed, anxious, and uneasy as we try to maintain a perfect image to meet the expectations of those around us. This leads to an inexplicable loneliness, even though we may still have many relationships. The greatest lesson from this trap is the realization of self-worth. Trying to please others doesn't mean we will be loved more. On the contrary, it makes us fade into the background and no longer be ourselves. We cannot love others fully if we don't love ourselves first. Self-acceptance and self-love are not acts of selfishness. They are essential for building healthy and sustainable relationships. Only when we can set healthy boundaries and dare to say no when necessary can we live a full and meaningful life. At the same time, this lesson emphasizes the importance of change and courage in the journey of rediscovering ourselves. Change is never easy, but it is a first step toward breaking free from dependence on others and living authentically. We need to understand that change is not loss. It is a process of growth that helps us become the best version of ourselves. Awakening and accepting the pain are parts of this journey, and when we are brave enough to face fear and anxiety, we will find true freedom and peace in our hearts. ChatGPT to NOI. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, feel free to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. We would love to hear from you. If you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. Your support is a huge motivation for us to continue bringing quality and meaningful videos. Let's build a strong community together where everyone can live authentically